This is Alex, and welcome back to English in Fluency. Have you ever looked at your English journey and felt like you were just spinning your wheels, making no real progress? Maybe you see other learners who seem to be zooming ahead, passing tests, and speaking with perfect clarity, and you start to wonder, what's wrong with me? Am I not trying hard enough? Am I wasting my time? If those feelings sound familiar, then this is the perfect conversation for us today, because we're going to talk about a fundamental truth in language learning. Don't rush your English. Slow progress is not just acceptable. It is real progress, and it is the only sustainable way to reach true fluency. Stick with me, because by the end of this, I want to fundamentally change how you view your learning pace, and I promise you will feel a wave of relief and motivation. Now, before we dive into the story and the core of the practice, I have a simple request. If you find value in this kind of real, honest conversation about the learning process, please take a moment right now to subscribe to English in Fluency. Sharing, liking, and subscribing really helps this channel reach more people who need this exact message, and I appreciate your support immensely. Okay, let's get into the heart of the matter. Our story begins with two friends, Liam and Khloe, who were learning English in the same intermediate B1 class at a large city language school called Global Speak Academy. They started on the exact same day, sharing a similar base of knowledge, both capable of handling simple everyday conversations and understanding the main points of clear standard input. Liam was always the one who chased the fastest, most dramatic results. His entire approach to learning English was fueled by a desire for speed. He treated the language not as a complex skill to be nurtured, but as a series of levels to be conquered as quickly as possible. He would sign up for the hardest possible classes, sometimes even sneaking into the B2 or C1 lectures, convinced that simply being exposed to difficult material would accelerate his brain. He bought all the advanced textbooks, the ones with the dense pages and tiny print, and proudly displayed them on his desk, often using them as a justification for his quick pace. He set himself the impossibly ambitious goal of trying to learn 100 new, complex vocabulary words every single week. He was constantly talking about the C1 level test, mentioning it to anyone who would listen, and declaring how he wanted to take it in a mere 6 months, a timeline that most experienced teachers would consider unrealistic for a true, deep jump from B1. He had this deeply ingrained idea that learning English was a race, a frantic sprint against an invisible clock, and he was absolutely determined to win, even if winning meant sacrificing understanding for volume. Liam's ambition, while initially motivating, quickly became a source of intense frustration. His learning was driven by the surface-level quantity of new knowledge, which led to a glaring mismatch between what he knew and what he could do. He would spend hours trying to force complex, academic-sounding vocabulary into his daily conversations. For example, he might try to use a word like meticulous instead of the simple careful, or elucidate instead of the very straightforward explain. The problem wasn't the words themselves, but that he hadn't allowed his brain the time to connect those complex words to the basic grammatical framework of B1. He would use the advanced word, but then struggle to construct the simple sentence correctly around it. This hesitation, this constant internal struggle between the high-level concept and the necessary low-level grammar, made his speaking sound disjointed, awkward, and surprisingly less fluent than his peers. He was pouring a sophisticated C1 level paint onto a B1 level canvas that wasn't prepared to hold it. He would often ask Khloe, who he perceived as moving too slowly, "Why are you still using that simple grammar book? Don't you want to move faster? Don't you see that the C1 books are the real challenge?" Liam's whole learning world was centered on the idea that difficulty equals progress, a belief that is tempting but often misleading in language acquisition. His internal state was perpetually stressed, fueled by the gap between his high expectations and his often disappointing real-world performance. Khloe, on the other hand, had a completely different, almost meditative approach to her studies. She was known for being quieter in class, not because she didn't know the answers, but because she spent more time intentionally listening than speaking. Her movements were deliberate. Her focus was deep. Her goal wasn't to learn 100 new words to impress anyone. It was to take 5 new, highly functional B1 words or phrases and use them so perfectly, so naturally, that they became a permanent, automatic part of her working vocabulary. Every day, she didn't rush to find new texts. Instead, she would reread the same simple conversation scripts she had used the week before, or listen to the same short, clear B1 level podcasts, sometimes the same episode 3 or 4 times. Liam saw this repetition and thought she was being inefficient, perhaps even lazy, or that she simply lacked the aggressive fire necessary for rapid progress. He once challenged her, stating, "Khloe, you're not going to get fluent if you keep doing the same easy things. You need to push yourself to the hardest level." But Khloe just offered a calm, knowing smile and replied with quiet confidence, "I'm not doing the same things, Liam. I'm doing them better each time. The content is the same, but my understanding is deeper." This difference in their outlook is the absolute foundation of our lesson today, and it's a crucial distinction for anyone at the B1 level. Liam was obsessed with covering new material, while Khloe was utterly focused on mastering what she already had. When you are learning English, especially at the B1 level, it is so easy to fall into Liam's trap of wanting to rush to the next certificate or the next level before the current level is truly solid. But language is not a checklist where you tick off items and move on. It's a foundation that you build brick by slow, careful brick. If you rush the foundation, if you don't let the cement dry and cure, the whole house will shake and eventually crumble when you try to add the roof of C1 complexity. To truly grasp why Khloe's slow method works, let's explore the concept of depth of processing in the brain. This is a scientific idea that explains how memory works. When Liam looked up a new, complex word, let's use the example ubiquitous, he would write it down once, quickly check the definition, and maybe try to use it in one forced sentence. That's shallow processing. He knew the definition in theory, but he didn't truly own the word in a way that made it instantly accessible. As a result, he couldn't hear it in a fast-paced conversation and immediately recognize its context, nor could he use it naturally in a sentence of his own, without a long, frustrating pause for mental translation. Now, consider Khloe. When she decided to fully integrate a new, simple, high-frequency B1 word, let's use the word reliable, she went through an intensive multi-step process. She would write it down, yes, But then she would spend 10 minutes looking up 3 different authentic examples of its use in simple sentences. Then she would say the word, and these examples aloud multiple times, focusing on the correct pronunciation and stress. Crucially, she would then spend time creating 10 different, personalized sentences about her own life, her own friends, or her own routine, integrating the word reliable. For example, my car is very reliable. Liam is not a reliable study partner. I need a reliable alarm clock. Finally, she would dedicate her listening practice that week to actively trying to spot and note down any instance of the word reliable she heard. She was processing it deeply. She wasn't just acquiring information, she was vigorously integrating it into her existing language system, creating multiple strong neural pathways connecting the word to meaning, sound, and personal context. This deep integration is the invisible process that transforms passive knowledge, the words you understand only when you read them, into active knowledge, the words that come out of your mouth automatically, without thinking when you speak. Let's take another example. A common B1 level grammatical structure like the phrasal verb look forward to. Liam understood its conceptual meaning. I anticipate this thing in the future. But because he rushed, his brain didn't have time to solidify the entire structure as a single unit. Consequently, when he spoke under pressure, he often forgot the necessary structure and might incorrectly say something like, I look forward the party, or the classic B1 error, I look forward to go. He was constantly rushing past the necessary repetition that solidifies structure. Khloe, recognizing the importance of this structure, had practiced saying and writing the correct form. I'm looking forward to, plus the verbing form, or the noun form, hundreds of times. She would practice specific, common examples like, I'm looking forward to seeing you, or I'm looking forward to the holiday. She repeated and used these chunks so many times that when the moment came to use the structure in conversation, she didn't have to consciously think about the grammar rule. The correct, fluent chunk, I'm looking forward to seeing you, simply came out. This is the profound secret of why slow, deliberate practice is so valuable. It gives your brain the necessary, patient time to automate these complex patterns. When you listen to a B1 conversation, your goal should not be to understand every single word, which is an overwhelming task, but to notice, isolate, and internalize these common, high-frequency grammatical structures, the glue of the language. For instance, in this story, you might have heard me say, she was being efficient, or it gives your brain the necessary time. These are extremely standard, functional B1 sentence patterns. Let's practice this deep integration right now. I want you to focus on the structure. It gives your brain the necessary time. Say this phrase out loud with me, focusing on the natural, connected rhythm of the speech. It gives your brain the necessary time. Now, let's change the subject slightly, but keep the core structure. The rest gave my body the necessary time. Repeat that. The rest gave my body the necessary time. This simple, focused repetition helps you slow down and concentrate on the how of the language, the rhythm, the structure, the pronunciation, not just the what, the individual words. This is the difference between learning a fact and mastering a skill. The months progressed, marking the halfway point in their school term, and Liam continued his frantic, unsustainable pace. He was perpetually stressed, feeling the pressure of his self-imposed deadline. This approach led to a classic pattern of academic burnout. He would study intensely for 2 weeks, pulling all-nighters and consuming endless new material, only to crash completely and stop studying for an entire week because he felt mentally exhausted and overwhelmed. His frustration levels were chronically high because he was constantly disappointed that his speaking didn't instantly match the polished, perfect fluency of a native English speaker. He made a devastating mistake that many B1 learners make. He was comparing his messy, real-time, error-filled learning process to the perfectly edited, scripted, and often simplified speech of a podcast host or a character in a movie. This is an unfair and impossible comparison that consistently destroys learner motivation. He was so intensely focused on the distant, glittering C1 finish line that he was completely failing to enjoy, or even learn properly from, the actual journey of the B1 level. One afternoon, Liam was struggling through a one-on-one session with his grammar teacher, a kind, exceptionally patient woman named Ms. Olivia. He was trying to articulate a complex opinion about global economics, an academic topic far beyond the B1 requirements. In his attempt to sound intelligent, he used a highly specialized, rarely encountered vocabulary word, disenfranchisement, but immediately after, he froze. His mind went blank as he desperately tried to recall the simple, past tense form of the common verb choose. He had momentarily forgotten the simple word he needed, because his brain was completely overloaded with the difficult, unnecessary one. He had the complex idea, but lacked the simple scaffolding to express it. Ms. Olivia waited patiently for him to finish, then gently stopped him. She looked him in the eye and said, with great warmth, "Liam, you have a truly beautiful and ambitious vocabulary. That is a wonderful asset. But language is not a war you win with the biggest weapon. It is like a garden you tend every day. You can plant the most exotic, impressive, and rare flowers, but if you don't water and nurture the simple, essential ones, the grass, the herbs, the strong roots, nothing will grow properly or last through a dry season. You must slow down. Take your foot off the gas. You need to focus on solidifying and automating the essential basics you already have." This was the first time the truth had been spoken to Liam so clearly. Khloe, meanwhile, was not just studying. She was genuinely thriving. She still did not possess Liam's extensive, but mostly inactive list of high-level vocabulary words. However, when she spoke, she was characterized by clarity, calmness, and unwavering confidence. She rarely hesitated or paused unnaturally. Crucially, she could handle all the essential, real-world, everyday conversations of the B1 level. Ordering food in a busy cafe, asking for clear directions from a stranger, expressing a simple, nuanced opinion about a local event, or explaining her weekend plans with effortless ease. Her sentences were simple, yes, but they were almost invariably grammatically correct and flowed with a natural conversational rhythm. She was practicing a technique that teachers call controlled production, where you consciously focus on using the language you already know in new, simple, and controlled situations until its usage becomes instant, automatic, and intuitive. For example, for a whole, dedicated month, she focused intensely only on the correct use of 4 essential modal verbs: should, could, would, and might. She didn't allow herself to move on to the more advanced modals like ought to or may, until she felt completely comfortable and automatic with the 4 basic ones. Let's try this deep, controlled practice right now, just like Khloe. This is a crucial B1 skill. I will give you a simple base sentence, and I want you to replace the main verb with should, could, would, and might, paying close attention to the meaning change and the natural intonation. The base sentence is, I stay home tonight. Now, say these 4 variations aloud with me, feeling the difference. I should stay home tonight. Say this with a tone of advice or recommendation, perhaps that you ought to do it. I could stay home tonight. Say this with a tone of possibility or suggestion, that you have the option. I would stay home tonight. Say this with a slightly hypothetical or conditional tone, often implying a condition. I would stay home tonight if I weren't so busy. I might stay home tonight. Say this with a tone of low possibility, indicating it is possible but not certain. See how this simple, hyper-focused practice, done repeatedly over a sustained period, builds genuine, usable confidence? This is what Khloe did every single day. She fundamentally understood that slow progress is cumulative. It means that every single small, consistent, repeated effort, even if it feels tiny at the time, adds up invisibly to a large, unshakable, and solid result over the long term. As the term neared its end, the moment of truth arrived. An unexpected opportunity arose in the language school. A small, select group of B1 students was urgently needed to help a visiting international business group from a large technology company. Their role was simple, but required high stakes, practical communication. They were to act as simple city guides and conversational partners, helping the delegates navigate the local area, cultural differences, and public transit. This was a real-world, immediate test of their functional English skills. Liam, with his overflowing academic vocabulary, was completely certain he would be selected. He mentally rehearsed all the impressive words he would use. Khloe felt a deep sense of nervousness, as any learner would, but also a quiet sense of readiness. The selection process was not a multiple-choice grammar test. It was a simple, unrehearsed, 5-minute conversation with one of the main business delegates, a senior executive named Mr. Chen, who was only interested in one thing: clear, effective communication. Mr. Chen wasn't interested in a student who knew the difference between ubiquitous and omnipresent. He just needed someone who could clearly explain how to buy a subway ticket, where to find a good local, authentic restaurant, and how to apologize politely and naturally if they accidentally bumped into someone on the street. He needed a practical communicator. Liam was called in first. True to form, he immediately tried to use his most impressive, elaborate phrases. When asked about public transport, he used language that sounded like it was pulled from an outdated travel brochure, saying things like, "The subterranean railway system operates at optimal frequency and provides highly efficient vehicular movement," instead of simply and clearly saying, "The subway runs very often and it's fast." He constantly got tangled and lost in his own complicated sentence structures, pausing awkwardly and using filler words, which visibly confused Mr. Chen, who was just looking for a swift, clear, and direct answer. Liam completely faltered when Mr. Chen shifted the conversation to a simple, immediate question about the current day's weather. He knew the complex, academic words, but he hadn't sufficiently practiced the basic, immediate, and automatic language of daily, predictable B1 life. His brain was too overloaded with trying to translate complex, unnecessary ideas instead of simply communicating a basic fact. Then it was Khloe's turn. She walked in, took a deep breath, and immediately adopted her slow, deliberate, and clear conversational pace. Mr. Chen asked her the same initial question. Can you recommend a place for dinner that is not too expensive but is genuinely local? Khloe replied instantly, clearly, and without any significant hesitation. Yes, I know a very good place. It's called The Old Corner. It is a small, family-run restaurant, but the food is delicious, and the prices are very reasonable. You should try the local specialty, the spicy noodles. It might be quite busy around 8 in the evening, so you could go a little earlier, maybe 6:30. Notice the beauty in her simplicity and functionality. She used those simple, highly frequent modal verbs, should, might, could, naturally, correctly, and functionally to convey advice, possibility, and suggestion. She made one tiny, forgivable grammatical slip, the kind that native speakers overlook, but her overall message was instantly clear. Her tone was confident, and her fluency was consistent. She communicated effectively and naturally. Mr. Chen smiled broadly and said, "Excellent. Your language is very easy and clear to understand. You will be a wonderful help. Thank you." Khloe was the student immediately chosen for the guiding role. This moment was not just a simple school anecdote. It was a profound, life-altering lesson for both Liam and Khloe. Liam finally and clearly realized that his frantic rush to reach C1 had tragically left his essential B1 foundation fragile and full of holes. He had spent his valuable time and energy collecting rare, specialized jewels of vocabulary instead of ensuring that the basic, essential tools he needed for daily life, the simple verbs, the correct prepositions, the automatic structures, were strong, sharp, and instantly available. He had disastrously prioritized quantity of new information over the absolute quality of his existing knowledge. Khloe, through her quiet, consistent success, proved definitively that slow progress is still progress, and in the crucial stages of B1 and B2 language learning, it is frequently the most effective and most sustainable form of progress. She had focused entirely on quality, on mastery, on making the simple, functional language utterly automatic. Let's dedicate a large section to what this means specifically for your B1 listening practice. When you engage with a B1 podcast like this one, or any English content, your primary goal must change. Do not fall into Liam's trap of trying to frantically look up every single new, difficult word the moment you hear it. This habit forces you to pause, breaks your flow, and trains your brain to rely on translation, which is the antithesis of fluency. Instead, I want you to focus deeply on 3 key, manageable things. Focus. Area 1. Intact phrases and language chunks. The first area is what we call intact phrases or language chunks. These are groups of 2 to 5 words that native speakers use together constantly, almost as if they were one single long word. For example, in the story, you may have heard me say, "This moment was a profound lesson," or "He got tangled in his complicated sentence structure." Notice that these are not individual words you need to learn separately. They are entire, functional units. You don't need to learn profound and lesson separately. You need to learn the whole, ready-made chunk, profound lesson, so you can use it instantly. When you hear a chunk in this podcast that sounds useful, or interesting, or just natural, I want you to pause the audio and repeat that entire chunk exactly as I said it. This exercise trains your mouth and your ear together, which is the definition of deep practice. Let's try a few more chunks from the story. I want you to repeat them, paying extreme attention to the rhythm and the connected speech. You must slow down. Repeat 3 times, focusing on the strong sound of must. The key takeaway for you. Repeat 3 times, focusing on how key takeaway is often run together. He was constantly talking about. Repeat 3 times, focusing on the ing form and the natural flow. In his attempt to sound intelligent. Repeat 3 times, focusing on the function of the phrase in his attempt to. This is a slow, methodical practice, but it is precisely what builds a fluent, usable English repertoire. You are programming fluency, chunk by solid chunk. Focus Area 2. Comprehension with simple language, the 80-20 rule. The second crucial focus area is comprehension with simple language. When you hear me use a slightly more complex word, like subterranean or antithesis, your brain's first job is not to find a C1 synonym. Your job is to mentally rephrase it immediately using the simplest B1 word you know. In this case, underground or opposite. If you can understand the main idea of the story, that Liam was rushing and Khloe was taking her time, and that Khloe was more successful in the end because she was more functional, then you are making absolutely excellent progress. You are not meant to understand every single nuance, joke, or academic detail at the B1 level. Your goal is to practice getting the main idea, following the narrative flow, and internalizing the common structures. This is what functional B1 proficiency is truly all about. It's about being able to function in the language, to survive and thrive in daily situations, not to deliver a high-level academic lecture on economics. We often call this the 80-20 rule. Focus on mastering the 20% of language that is used 80% of the time. Let's practice this rephrasing idea. I will give you a slightly more formal B1 phrase, and I want you to quickly say a simpler, more common B1 equivalent. The conversation was immediately concluded. Simpler. The conversation quickly finished. I must ascertain the correct procedure. Simpler. I need to find out the right way. The weather conditions were unfavorable. Simpler. The weather was bad. This internal translation and simplification is a key skill for reducing stress and increasing real-time comprehension. Focus Area 3. Mastering high-frequency grammar. The third focus area requires patience. Mastering high-frequency grammar points through repetition. At B1, there are crucial structures that must become automatic. We already talked about modal verbs and look forward to plus gerund. Let's add the distinction between using the present perfect simple, I have lived, and the past simple, I lived. This is a common source of frustration and errors at the B1 level. Liam often tried to learn the complex rule first, got confused, and gave up. Khloe took 1 week and just focused on the simple rule and repeated sentences that exemplified it. Let's practice the difference between these two simple tenses. Past simple, for a finished action at a specific time. I went to the park yesterday. I started learning English 3 years ago. Present perfect simple, for an action that started in the past and continues now, or a past experience without a specific time. I have lived in this city for 5 years. I have never been to that restaurant. Now, try to say the following sentence 2 different ways. Focus on the reason for the tense. I met Alex last year. Say this, meaning the meeting is a finished event. I have met Alex. Say this, meaning it's an experience in your life. The exact time is not important. This slow, dedicated practice on 1 grammar point per week is a genuine shortcut to fluency, because it completely removes that area of error from your spoken English. You are systematically building your fluency by removing the errors, not by adding complexity. Liam finally decided to change his entire approach. The moment of realization with Mr. Chen and Ms. Olivia's advice had resonated deep within him. He stopped the toxic habit of comparing his real-time progress to Khloe's success, or to the flawless speech of native speakers. Instead, he dedicated himself to a much fairer comparison, comparing his current ability only to his past ability. He took a giant, necessary step back and began revisiting the B1 materials he had previously dismissed as too easy. But this time, he practiced the Khloe way, deeply, slowly, consistently, and with a goal of mastery, not just exposure. He dedicated a small, manageable block of 20 minutes every single day, no more, no less, to reviewing a single grammar point he thought he already knew, but often misused. 1 week, he focused intensely on the difference between since and for when, talking about time, a classic B1 challenge. The next week, he focused on the correct use of used to describe past habits that no longer happen. This isn't rushing. This is reinforcing. It's the difference between a high-speed, uncontrolled sprint and the slow, deliberate work of a professional craftsman. Think of a bodybuilder lifting a heavy weight. They don't just lift it once and drop it. They perform many controlled, slow repetitions. The slow, focused repetition, done consistently over time, is precisely what builds the strong muscle memory for language, allowing it to be used fluently under pressure. Now let's talk about the emotional side of the don't rush philosophy, because this is often where learners fail. Liam's initial rush was rooted deeply in fear. The fear of being left behind, the fear of inadequacy, the fear of failing the next test. Khloe's contrasting, calm, quiet approach was born out of trust. Trust in the learning process itself. Trust in the power of consistency. And most importantly, trust in her own ability to learn. You, as the listener, must consciously grant yourself permission to slow down. If you miss a day of dedicated study because life intervened, it is not a disaster. It is merely a moment of necessary rest, and you simply resume tomorrow. If you forget a complex word you learned just last week, it simply means you haven't processed it deeply enough yet, and you just need to encounter it again, perhaps in a new, memorable context. This forgetting is not a failure. It is a normal, healthy human part of the learning cycle. We are not high-speed data processing robots. We are human beings learning one of the most complex, beautiful skills available. Be kind to your brain. Your assignment now is to celebrate the small, functional victories. Do not wait for the perfect C1 certification party. Celebrate the simple, everyday successes. Being able to understand a complex instruction from your teacher. Successfully giving a clear, short opinion to a colleague, or confidently ordering your coffee in English without that moment of stomach-clenching hesitation. These simple, high-frequency moments of effortless success are the true, practical indicators of B1 fluency, not a high score on an arbitrary test. Let's do another comprehensive, focused listening and speaking exercise based on this idea of simple language mastery. This practice will combine rhythm, common verbs, and simple adverbs. I'm going to say 6 important sentences from the narrative, and I want you to repeat them, focusing only on the flow, the natural rhythm, and the connected speech, not pausing to analyze the grammar. She smiled and replied, "I'm not doing the same things. I'm doing them better each time." Repeat this, focusing on the connection between doing them. Liam realized that his rush had made his foundation weak. Repeat this, focusing on the simple, strong verb made. You need to grant yourself permission to slow down. Repeat this, focusing on the phrase, grant yourself permission. This focused, slow approach will give you an instant return on investment. Repeat this, focusing on the chunk return on investment. He was constantly talking about the C1 level test. Repeat this, focusing on the sound of constantly talking. I want you to change how you view your learning pace. Repeat this, focusing on the simple, direct structure I want you to plus verb. Repeat those 6 sentences again, slowly and deliberately. When you repeat them with this intense focus, you are physically training your mouth to produce the English sounds correctly, and training your ear to hear the native rhythm. This is deep, active practice. This is slow, effective progress. This is what it means to be a conscious B1 learner. The final chapter for Liam and Khloe saw them become genuine collaborative study partners. Liam, finally humbled, learned the immense value of slowing down and focusing on the core essentials. Khloe, seeing Liam's renewed commitment and high-level knowledge base, learned that a certain degree of disciplined ambition is a healthy motivator. They realized that their individual, contrasting paces were both perfect, because they were perfect for them. The truly significant moment came much later. They both ended up taking the B2 exam, the next major hurdle, much later than Liam had originally, and unrealistically, planned. But when they finally took it, they both passed easily, and both with high marks. Liam passed not because he crammed new vocabulary, but because his core B1 foundation was finally solid and unshakable. Khloe passed because her communication was effortless, her simple language was automated, and her confidence was completely unshakable. The key takeaway for you, listening right now in this very moment, is this: your individual pace is the right pace. Do not, for a single moment, let the toxic comparison to other learners be the thief of your joy or your progress. If you learned just one new chunk of language today, or if you simply listened to this entire extended episode without feeling overwhelmed, that is legitimate progress. That is a measurable step forward. You are moving. You are learning. You are demonstrably on the path to fluency. Think about the next time you feel that internal, stressful urge to rush to the next level. I want you to consciously stop, breathe, and remember Khloe and Liam's story. Remind yourself that true, lasting language mastery comes from repetition, from deep and personal processing, and from relentless consistency, not from frantic speed. The ultimate goal is to make the functional English you already know so strong, so automatic, and so reliable that you can use it perfectly, even when you are nervous or under pressure. So, as we conclude this extraordinarily important and detailed conversation, I want to leave you with one final, powerful, and very specific call to action that aligns perfectly with everything we've talked about today. Instead of immediately looking for the next advanced C1 book or the next complex news article, I challenge you to consciously perform a mastery check. Go back to the simplest B1 material you have, a conversation script, a short story, or even a previous episode of this English in Fluency podcast that you thought was too easy. I want you to listen to it or read it 5 times over the course of the next week. First time, just listen or read for the main idea. Do you follow the story? Second time, listen specifically for 3 phrases or chunks that you like and want to use. Write them down. Third time, listen for one specific grammar point, like used to or the present perfect, and count how many times it is used. Fourth time, listen for pronunciation. Try to repeat the 3 phrases you wrote down, focusing on exactly matching the speaker's rhythm. Fifth time, simply listen and enjoy the confidence that comes from perfect understanding. This is not rushing. This is solidifying. This is the surest, kindest, and most effective way to build lasting, confident fluency. Do this one simple, repetitive thing this week, and you will be putting this entire lesson into powerful practice immediately. Now, I truly hope this extremely detailed episode has brought you a deep sense of calm and a strong, renewed commitment to embracing your own unique learning pace. If it helped you see your progress in a new, clearer light, please do let me know by leaving a comment below. It truly helps me understand what kind of detailed content supports your journey best. I will be reading your comments, and I might even feature some of your mastery examples in our next practice session. Thank you for joining me, Alex, here on English in Fluency. Keep practicing, keep listening, and most importantly, remember this: slow progress is absolutely, wonderfully, and certainly still progress. I'll talk to you next time.